Hello, friends and enemies, heroes and villains. Welcome to Epic Realms. I'm your host, Nick, and our guest tonight has many book series that she has written: The Dragon of Shadow and Air, Fringe Colonies, Minecraft Homes Adventures, and many more. She has written under multiple names, such as Jess Mountifield, Amelia Price, Marie Woodell, and now Talia Beckett. Talia, please welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How
Did
are
I
you?
did I pronounce all of those right?
Yes. Though I don't think I've published under Marie Waddell. That's
Hey,
actually one of my
oh,
characters.
that's your character in the
That's a
because that's a
character.
choose your own adventure book, right?
Yeah. Like,
Okay,
did I publish that under Marie Waddell?
that's what
Oh,
it
I might have
says.
done.
That's what it.
Actually, you might know that better than I do.
Yes, see, I do
There
my
are so
research.
many names I've lost track of one.
Yeah, I do my research. I do my research. I think that was on your on one of your profiles on one of the many sites that
Yes.
has profile things. 'Cause I read all of them. I go everywhere
Yes.
that has a
Okay.
profile and a bio. I read them all, and then I go and I look. I'm like, do I got these right? Do I have them? You've had all of
Yeah.
these names. Tell us about kind of the process of, from your first pen name or your author name and kind of what caused the changes or why. Because from what I understand, each of them has a little bit different of a story.
Yes. So I started off with Jess Mountifield because that was my name at the time.
Hmm.
So a lot of the first early books came out under Jess Mountifield. And I played around Marie Waddell, which is the one that you mentioned that I'd forgotten about. That was actually one of my early characters. And then I used that name as a character name in a game, and that's where the Choose Your Own Adventures came from. I was
Okay.
playing an online game at the time as Marie Waddell because it was good. I like to role play; it's a lot of fun. I'm sure we'll get to that
We
later
will
too.
definitely get into that.
um, so yeah, it started off with my actual name, and then I mostly wrote fantasy, sci-fi, a little bit of historical, which is what I started with. But then I decided that I wanted to try something really, really different, and I started writing the Mycroft Holmes books you mentioned. And I wanted to pick a new name for that because a lot of the advice at the time for indie authors, which is what I was that you have to be very careful about genre hopping. So I was like, if I'm trying something that's a mystery and it was slightly quirky, it was slightly paranormal, they were like, okay, put it out under another name and see what happens. So that's when I chose Amelia Price as the name for that series. But it still says on the cover Jess Mountifield writing as,
Right.
so it's not like I'm hiding it. And then the more recent stuff is coming out under Talia Beckett, which is my name now, and everything will slowly move over to Talia Beckett. I'm bringing it all back under one name,
Okay.
but it's going to take a little while to for it to all get there.
So you're going to be republishing all of your past books then?
Not all of them. Some of them I have pulled and decided they will stay forgotten to the, yeah.
To the
People don't
annals
need
of
to read
time.
some of the early ones. They really don't. But the yeah, it should sometime probably in the next year or two we'll start moving it all over. And a lot of the books that are coming out now, we're tagging them on Amazon with both author names. And then at some point we will hopefully ask Amazon and all of the other big book publishers to basically merge the two
Okay.
author pages and all of the author data into one.
Okay. Great. Do you think that there will be any issues with older readers not knowing? Like they come
I'm
across a new
hoping not.
book and they're like, I didn't even know.
I'm hoping not, because we're tagging both for now.
Hmm.
And I have made it so that a lot of the author information for Jess Mountifield now says, Jess Mountifield has a new name. Please go, please go to Talia Beckett. And we've been doing that already for about a year. So
Okay.
it's we're taking our time to make sure that we don't lose as many readers as possible.
When you were first starting out, because you're kind of a self-made writer, what was the process on your first releasing your first book? Did you have a lot of sources out there to help you, or was it just like, I'm just going to do this and do my best and cross my fingers and hope it works?
It was a little bit of both. I wouldn't say there were a lot of resources to help out, but there was definitely like, it wasn't like, the Wild West where you're suddenly out there on your own trying to forge a living. It had been established, like Kindle had been established for a couple of years. Amazon had opened the floodgates to self-published authors. And although I would say I was a relatively early adopter, there were authors like J.A. Conrath was a big one who was publishing a blog almost every day talking about his self-published numbers and how he had switched from traditional publishing to self-publishing, and which is what it was called then. Now you're just an indie,
Right.
but back then you were a self-published author and you were scum. Like when
Yeah.
I first started, but I first published the first one in 2010, and it was an interesting time to be publishing books as an indie author.
Did you start off just doing like ebooks and Kindle and stuff like that, or did you
Yeah.
have physical copies as well?
For about the first year, it was just the ebook, and it took me a lot longer to figure out how to do the print side of things and do it well.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to just throw it out there and look like a self-published author. I wanted to try and get it as good as possible the first time out. And I definitely still made a whole bunch of mistakes anyway, but I tried to, do my best. So I had my uncle-in-law at the time was a graphic designer, so I got him to sit down with me and help me do the front cover and make sure it was at least, it looked good. It didn't look like I'd homemade it.
Yeah.
I hired an editor for the first book, and yeah, I just did what I could really.
How hard, because it sounds like you were there during the transition from like Kindle and e-readers to like an Amazon store where you're selling your self-published books in Amazon and getting them listed there. How hard was that transition and getting in there to work on that?
It was actually surprisingly easy. Um, Amazon have really done a good job of trying to make it easy for authors. And in the early days, because there were so few ebooks, except for the traditionally published ones that were at massively ridiculous prices, they were putting them out there for the same price as the hardback. And everyone was like, but there's no physical cost involved. What do you mean you want $20 for an ebook? And all us indies were throwing them up there for three or four. And they were like, okay, we'll buy the indie book. So actually at the beginning, there was a lot of like, okay, this might be a crap book and you might even have a crap cover and you might not have a clue what you're doing, but it's so much cheaper than what the traditional authors were offering that actually a lot of us at the very beginning were like, we're making a decent amount of money. It's not actually very hard to find the readers at this point. But then as soon as you got that kind of news out to people, you suddenly had all these people throwing books up there that really weren't as good. And then you started to get the complaints and the people going, oh, self-published authors are scum. These are all really crap books. There's a reason there should be gatekeepers. And it started to get a bit of a bad rep for a little while.
Yeah.
And then the self-published authors that were serious basically upped their game. They had to. And you started to have a good cover, and you had to have a good blurb, and you had to have it edited and edited well, and you had to basically try and look like a traditionally published author.
Yeah. One, we've had so many authors on here that are well known, super popular, that all they just self-publish. You know, there's very few that don't. Even the ones that come on that are, we brought in from a publisher that's like, oh, here, can you have this person on the show? Almost all of them are like, well, yeah, I have those, but I also have my self-published ones, which actually do way better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, there's something to be said about, like I said earlier, a self-made author, because not only do you have to go through the trials and tribulations, but both ends of the spectrum. Like, you sell a really popular book and you know what that takes, but you also know what it's like when you're just starting out, as opposed to, you don't necessarily know that story for a lot of other people. So did you have any issues with audiobooks? Did you, because you have at least one audiobook series. I think you have two, right, that are an
Um,
audiobook. Is it just one?
I have two. I have two
Two.
in
Okay.
audiobook. I have a collaboration series with Dawn Chapman,
Mm-hmm.
which is my lit RPG books that I worked with her on. They were the first audiobooks I had. She pretty much handled all of that for me. She already had a narrator for that series. So I just got to go along for the ride, which was
Okay.
actually a lot of fun. She sent me files, I got to listen to them, I got to get excited. And then my newest set of audiobooks are the Dragon of Shadow and Air series. And to some degree, I also kind of have been able to go along for the ride with those ones. I got to pick my narrator
Okay.
out of a pool of auditions. But mostly because Tantor have handled those. They bought the rights. So I was kind of like, okay, let's see what happens when someone big buys the rights.
Right.
But that's been an interesting journey. I'm actually getting Poseworth, for the people that know him often in the chat, I think. He's actually going to be narrating my Guild of the Eternal Flame series. He's about halfway through book 1 right now.
Okay.
So
Well, that's excellent.
I'm kind of bringing it back a bit in-house because I think I'd like to do it myself and see how that goes.
Yeah, and you'll have to make sure that you have it uploaded to Audible and all the places and get all their things. I don't really know how that works. I've had a couple audiobook narrators on the show, and I'm still like, I still don't understand how you guys get it from point A to point B where someone's paying for it. But I'm glad, because I do audiobooks pretty much specifically now, just because it's so much easier for me to get through them. And I did listen to the first book of your Shadow and Air series in Audible, and it was and I totally said that wrong, but you know what I'm talking about, the Dragon of Shadow and Air.
Yes, Dragon of Shadow and Air, yeah.
And I really enjoyed that series, and I'll talk
Awesome.
about that here in a bit. But tell us a little bit about, for you, the editing process, because you write characters. You've got such the wide scope, whether it's in the Mycroft series or the Shadow and Air. How is it writing a character that might not necessarily have the same kind of what's the word I'm looking for? The same kind of lingo,
Background?
I guess.
Okay.
So say you're writing somebody that's an American, for instance, and you use, certain terms, like, we don't necessarily, like, we say gas station over there, very often it's not gas station, it's what, petrol?
It's petrol station.
Petrol
yeah.
station, or garbage is rubbish.
Yeah.
And it's said differently. How do you balance out, like, I'm writing an American person and making sure you leave out the terms that aren't used over there or over here and are used,
Well,
back and forth?
a lot of the time that came down to my editor at the beginning. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I had to be taught a lot of the terms. I had a slight advantage in that I grew up in the US,
Yeah.
or at least I spent 2 or 3 years there when I was younger. So I knew some of the differences. But I wrote it all originally in American English in British English, sorry, with the British terms for everything, and then would have to essentially, just part of the second draft, go through and change as much of that as I recognized.
Yeah.
But it's even now, the editors will come back to me and say, you're still getting this one wrong. You're still saying a block of flats rather than an apartment block. You're still, like, there were a few of them I don't think I'm ever going to remember to do the right one.
Right.
But it's I think being immersed in the American world, because I play games with American people
Right.
and all that sort of stuff, and Poseworth is American, so sometimes that helps. I'll say to him, "Is this slang British? If I said this, would you understand?
Right.
Do you know what I'm talking about?" kind of thing. So sometimes, even while I'm writing now, I'm very conscious of being like, okay, what's the American for this? I now write in American English, so I will write with the American spellings, and I will write as much as possible with the American variants of everything.
Yeah. Of course, unless you're writing somebody who's not a character from America.
Unless I'm writing Mycroft, in which case I have to suddenly go British again.
Tell us about Mycroft. Tell us about that and how that came about. Because I'm a big fan of all of the the Sherlock Holmes pantheon of things.
Yeah. So it really started for me when the BBC did the first Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch.
Okay.
And I watched the first episode, and I'd heard of Sherlock. I'd talked about Sherlock. I knew some of the Sherlock stories. I'd watched the Disney version with the mouse, like all of that kind of stuff. Like, I'd done the kid versions of Sherlock, but that was the first moment that it kind of woke me up to, like, the adult version of Sherlock and what Sherlock could really be.
Yeah.
And so I then burned through the entire collection of stories in the space of about 2 months. I got one of the big hardbacks with all of them in. But it wasn't really until sort of 2 or 3 years later, when they brought out the third season, that I felt like I could even approach it as another writer. I was like, I'm nowhere near as good enough a writer to actually tackle something like Sherlock or Mycroft or anything like that, because they're too smart, and you've got to be a really good writer to write smarter than you are.
Right.
And to make it seem like you're smarter than you actually are. So I think it was watching the third season, and there was just, I can't remember which episode of the season, but there's one of the scenes with Mycroft where I got to the end of the episode, and I just said to one of my friends who was watching it with me, I get Mycroft now on a level I didn't before. And I would really, really like to figure out how someone would just get Mycroft to like them. What kind of person would you have to be to get Mycroft to even like you? Because he doesn't like anybody.
Right.
And so we just sat down, and I think we spent the next 2 or 3 hours just trying to figure out if there was anyone who could exist with any kind of background or any kind of story who could get Mycroft to like them. And it was just meant to be for fun. Like, I didn't really care. I was just that curious about the character. I wanted to find it out. And I think by the end of the 2-hour conversation, we had the idea for the first 4 or 5 books. And I was just like, actually, I could write a story about someone just trying to get Mycroft to like them.
And how did you broach that? Because isn't there a whole like, isn't there an ownership thing that had to be dealt with and like rights and all that kind of stuff, or was it to the point where it was already public?
That's one of the fun things about the Sherlock world. Most of it, but not all of it, is out of copyright. I'm not sure if the last 10 stories are out of copyright yet. Copyright laws changed partway through the Sherlock series is being published. So the first set of stories is out of copyright. And as soon as the character is out of copyright in one story, you can use the character in those versions of the story. You can't use the character development from the stories that are still copyrighted, but you can use anything that is in the early stories. So
Okay,
Mycroft and Sherlock and all of that are fair game.
that's awesome. Was that a lot of extra fun for you? And how did it flex your writing skills to go into that genre?
Well, to start off with, just the whole having to write someone else's character and keep it consistent
Mm-hmm.
was a huge challenge. Like, I hadn't had to try and do that before. So in terms of writing characters, it was like a really good learning exercise. But also it was a lot of fun to then take that and play with it, because my Minecraft series isn't set in the original era. I've deliberately aged them and they're immortal. So
Okay.
it's still Mycroft and it's still Sherlock, but it's set 150 years later, and they have all the memories and all of the stuff from the previous stories. But Watson is dead, and Sherlock and Mycroft are the only ones left alive.
Oh, that's kind of a bummer. I like Watson. I mean, I like Mycroft and Sherlock just a bit more, but what made you think, hey, let's fast forward the timeline or let's make them older and
I think it was probably a little bit of inspiration from the BBC series. I wanted to play with them in the modern world as much
okay.
as reading the book had inspired me and made me think I would, at some point in the future, I want to write about Sherlock and Mycroft, or at least Sherlock. It was having that modern Mycroft that made me go, I actually really like the idea of a modern Mycroft. And I wanted to, like, one of the things we talked about in how would we get Mycroft to like someone, we felt like we had to have him having been softened up by something. And the only way we could think was, what about the boredom of being immortal? What about, you know, because we went through all of these possibilities of how do you get anyone like to be interesting enough to Mycroft. And we basically decided that Mycroft would actually have to be a little bit more gentle than,
Yeah.
than he was in any of the stories. He'd actually have to be bored.
Did you have anybody come back to you and be like, this isn't Mycroft, this isn't how he's supposed to be? Did you get
Oh,
any
of
pushback
course.
on that
Of
character?
course. Of course.
And how
Yeah.
do you
And
personally, not dealing with them, but how do you internalize that and like deal with that without getting too hard on yourself?
um I think it's a process that I've learned over the course of publishing the books, because I've gone through the period where everyone's like, "Oh, self-published authors are scum," and I've had a lot of reviews just from people who are, I guess, jealous or whatever. So now when I see a review, I'm just like, I just take it with a pinch of salt. It's very clear, or it's usually quite clear, if it's the person's issue or if it's my story's issue. And often I kind of find that if you wait until you've got lots of reviews or lots of feedback, and half of it saying this is good and half of it saying this is bad, you can just ignore the ones that say it's bad, because then it's just an opinion
Yeah.
and it's just a preference based on that person. I only usually worry if the people who normally love my work are also saying, oh, this is a problem, you've not got this right, you've, mucked this up or whatever. But usually, I mean, I have beta readers now, so they usually tell me fairly early on in the process if something is wrong.
How does that work? How does your beta readers process work? Because every author seems to have a little bit of a different selection of how they do it. Some people, they take random people from their newsletters, or it's people they personally know, or stuff like that. What is your process?
It's a bit of a mix. I have a few people that I've known personally that I've shoved the book under the nose of a few times and been like, "What do you think of this?" I have a friend who I run a lot of the magic systems and the world building and the big bads by. I will sit down with him and be like, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? I'm stuck on this, and get some feedback that way. And that's probably my first person that I go to whenever I have an idea. In fact, I sat down with them a couple of weeks ago and planned out a bit more of the magic system for my current series to be like, okay, I need more of this. Um, but then I will take it to probably the stream, I suppose, is probably the next place where people see it because I live write on the stream. So there are things that they've picked up on that have helped as well. And then the first book in a series will go through an extra set of readers with the publisher that I currently publish through.
Okay.
And they have their own team who will pick up on everything.
Okay.
And so, but that's only usually the first book of a series. I don't tend to worry too much once I've got the first book sorted because at that point I'm rolling, and as long as everyone likes the characters, I don't usually struggle with plot issues at that point.
Yeah, because you've already got it kind of in their mind what it is and all that kind of stuff. Let's talk about the Fringe Colonies, because the covers of that, I see that and I'm like, this is not. You talked earlier about changing up genres a little bit, and this looks like one of those situations where it's another little bit more of a sci-fi looking book. You want to tell us about it?
Yeah, Fringe Colonies is a set of books that is actually based on real life, and I know that sounds a bit weird when you're talking about sci-fi, but it's the books I wanted to write about a game I used to play. My very first MMO was a little cutesy game called Puzzle Pirates, and you have these little kind of chibi cartoon pirates, and you're playing all of these puzzles to get your ship to move and to make things in shops and to do all of these sort of piratey based activities to sword fight with people and things like that. And I met a lot of really, really great people, and they were the people that got me writing in the first place. So my first book was a pirate themed like romance. And then I kind of, I drifted out of the game, lost touch with people. And then unfortunately one of the people that introduced me and Poseworth to each other, he died. He had a seizure. And I've been talking to him the day before, and we've been talking about playing Puzzle Pirates and how much it was a big part of especially my early adult life. And I kind of like, obviously I was really upset. And then probably about 6 months later, I was like, I need to do something to honor these guys and the role they played in my writing life and the fact that they got me writing. And I just thought I need to write some of our story. But I didn't want to go back to the pirate fiction because I tended at that point to write more sci-fi, more fantasy. So I was like, well, what if I write essentially space fantasy? So I translated it into a space pirates kind of feel rather than a like 1800s 1700s kind of feel. And I wrote basically across the 5 books the story of some of the stuff that we got up to, and I had to embellish things, I had to change things here and there, but actually a lot of it is stuff that in one way or another actually kind of happened. Oh, I seem to have lost sound. Hold on. Have I pulled out my sound? I can't hear you. Okay, hold on. I seem to have lost my sound. Okay. I don't know if you can hear me either. It's saying it's all using this.
There we go.
Okay, there we go. That's back.
That was on me, not on you.
Oh, okay.
I was coughing and I never unmuted myself. So
Okay.
I was like, I'm coughing, and yeah, that was totally on me. That's okay. The joys of doing it live, and we can edit that in post for the podcast. What did those characters show up in? Did those characters show up in your story? You're like the person who had passed away. Did they show up as a character?
Yes, he's Ike in the story.
And is that a prominent character or just like
yes,
okay?
Yes, not the major character. So I did it from my point of view. So the main character, Kit, is me. It's kind of that simple. It's the first time I've done a full self insert. Yeah,
Okay.
That's me.
Okay.
Poseworth is also in there as Rin.
Okay.
But he doesn't appear, I think, until the end of the second book. So I didn't meet him right away. And then there's a friend of mine called Dylan he's Dante in the books. And sometimes on my Discord server you can see Waru, and that's Sky. and Runasay, who is, oh, what did I call him in the books? I actually can't remember what I called him in the books. Taryn, I think. Um, so that, yeah, they're all there. Like, these are real people, and I got back in contact with them all to write the books, and that's actually how Posworth and I got talking again.
Okay.
So yeah, that led to a lot of things. Those 5 books.
That's awesome. Is that a book? Are any of these other books? We talked about audiobooks. Are you planning on doing any of your old books in audiobook for the future?
Yes, I'd like to do the Fringe ones. Posworth and I are talking about doing that as a duet. I think
Okay.
I'd like to do that myself. So
Okay.
we will see. But it's kind of one of those things where a lot of my earlier work, it isn't as good because I was still learning on the job.
Yeah.
So some of them, I think they'd need to be polished up. I'd need to go through them again and have them edited again before I could ever consider something like audio for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely for some of them. I would like to see them in audio, but audio takes a lot of effort.
It does. It does for sure. A lot of effort or money, depending on how you want to
Yes.
do it.
Yep.
Well, let's talk about one of your newer books. I mentioned it
Okay.
earlier, the series A Dragon of Shadow and Air. That's obviously, I mentioned earlier, like I've listened to that on audiobook, but you released those pretty quickly back to back with each other.
Yes.
Was there a
Yeah.
reason for that? Did you just write them all out and then eventually it was like, okay, one's out 2 months later, one's out 3 months later, one's out? What was the thought
Um,
process behind that?
that is my current publisher's strategy. They are very much like a rapid, you get the books out in a series all really close together because a lot of readers, they actually don't want to wait a year for the next book.
Right.
And I can write that fast. So why not? It's
Yeah.
kind of like the attitude. And it surprises a lot of people that I can write that many books a year. But when you actually look at a lot of the original, like main fiction writers, someone like Charles Dickens, he wrote 2 million words a year for over 10 years in a row. And we look at that and think, how does anyone write 2 million words? Like, for the length of my books, that's about 24 books. He was writing 2 books a month for over 10 years.
That's crazy. Yeah, when you
So
think
I'm
about
like, well,
it.
if Charles Dickens can do that, and everyone looks at his stuff and is like, this is the height of literary fiction, then why can't we now, like,
Yeah.
write that kind of level? So I don't write 2 million words a year because I think personally that is insane. But I aim for 1 million. So that's 12 books a year easily.
So
So that's one a month.
I love the concept of it because it's kind of like a modern urban fantasy meets Aragon, essentially. Is kind of the way I
Yeah.
looked at it.
Yeah.
Was that an inspiration for you for the series, or was it just like an afterthought? You're like, oh, wait a second, this is kind of similar to that, but it's an urban fantasy.
I've never read Aragon.
Okay.
I haven't read it at all. I just really, really love dragons.
Yeah.
And after the Fringe Colony series, I'd handed that to a publisher that very much specialized in sci-fi. And he was like, you are a great writer. You are clearly very driven. You can write fast, but your voice doesn't lend itself to sci-fi because it's a very male-dominated genre and you write like a woman. You write the way a woman would want to read. So he was like, why don't you try urban fantasy? And I was like, I don't even know what urban fantasy really is.
Okay.
And I thought, like, oh, that's Dresden Files.
Yeah.
Like if anyone said to me, what's urban fantasy? My brain would have been like, oh, Dresden Files. It's wizards and witches and mystery. And I wasn't really like excited about writing that. And then he was like, no, 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 no. Go check out these books by these female urban fantasy writers.
Right.
And they were all things like dragons and elves. And I was like, okay, this is Tolkien, but in the real world.
Yeah.
This isn't witches and wizards in the real world. This is Tolkien in the real world.
Yeah.
And I was like, at that point, it was like my brain lit up. And I was like, I found my genre. I found my home. I found the things I love to write. And I think that was some of what fueled that Dragon of Shadow and Air series coming out so fast. I was quite happily writing a book in 4 weeks because I was like, I want to write the next one. I want to
Yeah.
write the next one. I want to know what these dragons are doing next. And it played into all of my strengths. Like I'd spent a lot of time getting really good at fantasy. I'd spent a lot of time writing about characters and I have a romance pen name that we don't talk about.
I missed one. You're telling me I missed one?
It's not public that it's me, so it's very hidden. But then and also I'd spent a lot of time writing actions and battles and stuff like that. And everyone said, oh, your strengths, it's funny, your strengths are the characters and the romance and the angst, but also the battles. Like, how do you combine the two? And female-led urban fantasy is where those two come together.
Yeah. And I like the fact that it's, you don't have, like you said, like it's something that a woman would like to read, but I thought that I really enjoyed it, and I'm like, I can't wait to get through the rest of the series. Obviously, I've got a pile on the side a mile long, but I can't wait to get through the rest of that series because it's just so fascinating to me, the concept of it. Like, I know a lot of urban fantasy. I've gone through a lot of urban fantasy, but this is, to me, feels like a little bit different of a twist on that genre to me personally. So I was really enjoying it. How did you mentioned earlier, you found somebody to do the audiobook narration for that, and it was kind of fell into that. Was there any communication between you and the narrator on anything? Whether it's pronunciation of words, or how should I do this scene, because your narrator is very good at um, portraying the different characters separately and not just being a narrator and like performing it. Was there any
Yeah,
communication between you?
there wasn't a lot actually. Because I got to choose from a bunch of auditions. I was very particular in who I chose. I was very much like, I want someone who can handle multiple characters and actually really bring the characters to life, because that's my favorite part. If
Right.
I'm being I'm very character driven in what I write, so I wanted them to bring the characters to life. And that was one of the big reasons I chose that narrator. She is very, very good at what she does.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, other than a pronunciation guide that I provided for book one, I
Yeah.
have not really done anything else. I just pronunciation on some of the names and some of the terms, and that was it. And off she went. So,
Okay.
and I'd rather do that. I'd rather let the narrator be free to interpret the book how they feel is right. Because at that point, I've done my job, or at least I feel like I've done my job. And if I've done my job well, then if they do their job well on top, then we end up with something great without me having to interfere.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And there's always, I've heard so many people say, when people come up like, how do you pronounce this character's name? However you want to pronounce it. It's I wrote it, but it's your book, sort of thing. And it
Yeah.
sounds like you're kind of like in a little bit in that mentality of things. What do you think set this book apart from the rest of your previous books? Because
I
obviously
think
this did much more,
Yeah,
much
it did. It suddenly
more.
took off.
Yeah.
This is the book that made my career. The Dragon of Shadow and Air are probably the books that made me go from selling a hundred copies every month, maybe to thousands. So um it was kind of the point where I was like, I think it was the passion. The fact that I had found the genre that merged all of my strengths into one book or
Right.
one series. But also I think partially rapidity, the speed,
Okay. Yeah.
of
Yeah.
bringing them out.
Like the repetition.
Yeah, but also I had them with the right publisher. We switched publisher for that
Okay.
series. My sci-fi publisher was like, I can't do an urban fantasy series justice, but I can introduce you to someone who can.
Yeah.
And they basically made that happen for me. They were actually really, really lovely. And they basically handed me the right publisher, and they had a lot of big urban fantasy authors with that kind of urban fantasy already. And I could basically then just, they send it out to their newsletter, they send it out to this. And it was the original covers and blurbs that I had got for them, thinking that, this was going to be me done by me. And then I handed this over to a publisher, and they just they just had the right people to sell it to. They already knew who needed it and who
Yeah.
the audience were, and they just did the rest. So I think it was the combination of all of that and striking at the right time, and just, yeah. It's
Let
kind of hard to say exactly what it was
Yeah.
that
Let's
suddenly
talk
made
about the
it go
covers for
over.
a second. Those covers are beautiful and gorgeous, and they're all, you can tell they're all different books, but they all look very similar to each other.
Yeah,
Did you
yeah.
did they do all of that, or did you have a hand in that?
Um, I actually ended up finding the cover artist for that one.
Okay.
I can't remember what website I found them on. And this is really bad. I can't remember their name either.
Okay.
Um, Hold
That's
on.
all
I could
right.
probably look it up. I can look it up. I do know the name of the odd author. I've asked because I don't interact with them directly because the publisher handled it.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't need to know this author's name. I literally found the first cover on a pre-made cover website and was like, that's the cover, I want that cover.
Yeah.
And then we got the cover artist to design all of my covers since. They have done every single cover I've had since.
That's awesome.
It's not like me to forget a name.
Well,
I'm gonna have to see
there's
if I
so
can
much
find
to
this.
try and remember, especially when you're sitting down and you're put on the spot. It
Yeah.
happens, and it's it happens so often that you have no idea. So
I've remembered it. Someone called Bandre. It's his online name. I don't know his real name.
Okay.
Bandrei.
Okay.
Bandre.
There we go. Shout
He
out to
designs my
Bandre.
covers. Or she, actually.
Or
I don't
she.
actually know.
Yeah.
I don't know
Shout out
gender.
to them. Shout out to Bandre.
But yeah, they design my covers. So
Yeah, those are
they've done all of the Dragon of Shadow and Air 12. And they're also now doing my Dragon Apparent series, but they're also doing my collaboration series with Andrew Bellingham and all of the Time of the Dragon series as well.
That's great. And yeah, just it fits the genre, I think, super well. And it you get a sense of the character
pops.
and what's going on. Yeah, very much. Let's talk about your Dragon Apparent series. So this is your new series, right? Your newer series.
Yeah.
And it's doing super well from our conversations, right?
Yeah, it had a bit of a rocky beginning. We had a little bit of trouble with the publisher. I say trouble with the publisher. We had trouble. My editor died, which is a really, really sad thing to happen. They weren't actually someone I knew because of the way the publisher I'm with at the moment works. It goes through quite a process.
Yeah.
And because I'd done a lot of work on the Dragon of Shadow and Air series, so the editor didn't actually have to do that much for those. So I never really interacted with them. But they died right before the first book of Dragon Apparent was handed into the publisher. And they tried to find me another editor, and I didn't mesh well with the next editor of the book. We were just like, oh, this is not like, it was almost like we just didn't understand each other. Right. So we had a moment where the first book came out and I was like, I'm not happy with this. So we delayed the rest of the series while we were, we found an editor that I was happier with, and that's completely sorted now. And the publisher were great with it. It was like, I want to make sure I'm not slagging off the publisher. The publisher were great at handling it. It was just, we needed an editor.
Some people
with a
just don't
difference.
gel. You can be as professional as you want, and you can have the same interests, but sometimes there's just a gelling that just doesn't happen.
And I think they from what I could gather and from what it felt like, they were used to editing books for a male audience, and they were more used to editing the sci-fi and that sort of thing. That I would like, if I'd been writing a sci-fi like Fringe, they'd have been the perfect editor.
Yeah.
If I was trying to sell to that audience, but I wasn't. I was trying to write the urban fantasy for women, and I felt very much like it stripped out some of that feminine from the main character. So I was like, no, put it back. So we had differences, but it's been completely sorted now. So now the series is rolling. So it got off to a slow start, but the last, I'd say probably 6 to 8 weeks, it's kind of really picked up and really started to outsell everything else. So
can you give us a little synopsis of what the book and book series is about?
Okay, Dragon Apparent. It's still very much dragons, urban fantasy dragons in the modern world. But this one, the main character, she's been brought up in a human world, and she thinks she's a human. And then suddenly, in the first book, her mentor goes missing, and she's like, "Okay, what's happened?" So it kind of starts with that kind of more mystery feel. But then she basically is in a panic situation and just transforms into a dragon, because that's the only way to get out of the situation. So she suddenly finds she is a dragon.
And she's just been in human form the whole time?
And she's been in human form the whole time.
Okay.
And then it's about her discovering her powers, discovering who she is, discovering the dragon world, going to a dragon city. And I like to start with the fantasy element hidden from the human world. So I have all these hidden cities scattered across the world. And I've picked a location just a little bit north of the LA for the main city of this particular dragon world. And it's all about her trying to, I've gone a bit darker with this one too. So the bad guys are actually more kind of corrupted demonic creatures. So there's a little bit more being chased by demons in the dark, down dark alleys and all of that kind of stuff. And her trying to learn how to fight those, but they can only be killed with magic and that kind of sort of thing.
Do you have to do a lot of research when you're like looking, okay, well, if I'm going to have a hidden city, where am I going to put it? How is it going to, how am I going to explain it to my audience? Say they live in LA and they, do you have to do a lot of research for stuff like that?
Google Maps is amazing, especially Google Street View.
Yeah.
I've definitely walked around a lot of LA on Google Street View because I am nowhere near LA.
Right.
Occasionally I will do that. Sometimes I'm just like, I will ask someone American and be like, dude, where can I set this that, it is similar to this? Sometimes I'm just a bit vague. Like I know that Texas is a desert and there's a lot of desert areas, and same with Arizona. So I'll be like, if I want something to be a bit deserty, I'll just be like, oh, it's in Arizona or it's in Texas,
Yeah.
like, so I will sometimes cheat a little bit, but um yeah, it's kind of like I do a little bit. And on the stream, I don't know if I was streaming earlier today, and I was like, was partway through something, and I was like, huh, I don't know if this military guy would call it this or call it that. And I was just gonna be like, pose what do I call this?
Yeah. What's
Because
a terminology that would be
yeah,
used?
yeah.
Which we talked about
So
earlier. There's that whole, what is the terminology that's used, and even there are people that write, and then even in the U.S. and they write for someone who's been in the military, and
yeah,
people that have been in the military go, we would never. That's how wouldn't be how we breach a door,
yeah,
say. And so they have to research. Okay, well, how does the military breach door? What is the how do they communicate and stuff like that? So yeah,
yeah.
that research
I don't
is
always get that right, but I try for the most part. I do sometimes have like people from the military reaching out to me and being like, I don't think that's how the military would do it. And I have a few bad reviews where they're like, soldiers wouldn't do that. And I'm like, it's a fantasy world. I don't care.
yeah,
Like to some degree, I'm like, okay, this is urban fantasy. They're not going to be like perfectly the same. Would a soldier react to a dragon the same way they react to a human? How do you know if the soldier's going to do what the soldier is trained to do if they're confronted by a dragon? So
right,
sometimes I'm a little bit like, I feel like I should have more artistic license
yeah,
than if I was trying to write like a proper full military book. So sometimes I would be like, I don't care, I got that wrong. Then there are other times where I'm very much like, okay, I want the correct terminology. I want to know what a military person would do in this situation. Like I want to know what the protocol is.
yeah, for sure. That makes sense. Do you have um, people that will compare the Dragon of Shadow and Air series to this one? Are there people that have crossed over? And what do you see as the differences between the two?
Yeah, some people have crossed over. Most people seem to be really liking it, which is good, which is good. Generally, the feedback seems to be quite positive that I've written another good series, so I'm happy with that. It's not massively different. I know the Dragon of Shadow and Air is very much an elf with a dragon companion, and then the dragon apparent is very much the main character is the dragon. But in terms of like the feel of the stories, the kind of the types of plot, I've still got a kick-ass female lead. I've still got dragons. I've still got magic. I've still got trying to hide that from humanity and how that goes when it comes out. I've still got all of the usual elements, and I've still got the big action scenes and the battles with the bad guys. And like to me, those are like they're my trademarks. Then all of my books, no matter what genre I write, to some degree, those things are in there. So it's still those kinds of things.
Yeah, you seem to have a gift for developing secondary side characters. You talked about the Fringe books where there's some side characters in there. Obviously, the Shadow. Gosh, I can't pronounce it. Holy cow!
Dragon of
Dragon of
Shadow
Shadow
and
and
Air.
Air. Wow. There's a lot of really great side characters in there as well. That it's like I want to know more about this character. I want to know more about that character. Do we get that in the Dragon Apparent series?
Um, I try to as much as possible. Um, it's kind of one of those things where I'm like, I feel like I discover them a lot of the time along with everyone else.
Okay.
I'm very much what they would call a discovery writer, although I have an outline for a lot of the books. My outlines can be very bare bones. So I'm writing a chapter and I've got maybe a sentence or two of what needs to go in the chapter, and it's just the basic plot. And I feel like sometimes I'm just throwing stuff at my characters and letting my characters react, and I'm writing how they would react. So unless my characters know and are going to tell me, I don't know. So it's kind of one of those things where I tend to kind of go with the gut of what it feels like it should do and where it should go and who you should get to know. And if my main character doesn't know it because I'm writing from this really tight first person limited point of view, if my main character doesn't know it, then neither do we.
Yeah.
Like if she doesn't get to find out about it, then neither do we. But then I'm hoping like, over time to build up some of those into where you get bigger pictures and you get more of the side characters. And I've got a few ideas for some spin-off series for some of them where they will be from the point of view of some of the side characters.
Nice. Awesome. Do you have any other, things for this book series or in this world and stuff like that? You want to talk about that at all? Maybe just a little bit?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I mentioned on Facebook today I have a little bit of announcement. The Dragon Apparent series is going to become an entire universe. We're going to be calling it the Dragon Protectorate universe.
Okay.
And as I was saying a little bit earlier about meeting with a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago to talk about the magic of the universe or the world, and build on the magic system a lot. We've done a lot of work on the magic system, and it feels like it has a lot more scope. Because as much as I love Dragon of Shadow and Air, I don't know what else to do with it. Like, people keep being like, "Can we have a sequel series? Can we know about more of these people?" And I'm like, I don't want to give the reader something I can't deliver well.
Yeah.
But the more we've talked about the magic system of the Dragon Apparent series, the more it's been like, actually, there is so much more scope for this. So we are developing a second series set on Earth in the same world, um, under the Dragon Protectorate universe. And I'm actually dressed as the main character today. So this is kind of a bit of a cosplay. She's going to be a little of a steampunk, in human form anyway. It's going to be another Shift the Dragon.
Okay.
And we're going to call her Artemisia.
All
So
right.
she's going to be a silver dragon called Artemisia. And she's going to be the main character of the next series, but it's going to be in the same universe as Dragon Apparent.
That's awesome. That's super cool and exciting. Do you know when the first of that's going to come out? Do you have an idea, or
Um,
is it just like it's the announcement? We don't have details.
we don't have massive details yet. It's a very complicated process with the publisher to get the publishing dates because of the way they work. And as I've said, they bring out rapid release. They like to make sure that they're going to have several books before they even start the process. And I've had a lot of health issues the last year or so, and I'm the last few deadlines for the Dragon Apparent series. I'm right up to the wire, and I don't like being right up to the wire with my deadlines. I like to have plenty of breathing room to allow
Yeah.
the book to be the best it can be. So I'm desperately trying to finish the last few books in the Dragon Apparent series. I'm writing book 8 now. So hopefully that will be finished within the next 6 to 8 weeks. And then I'm actually going to take as much time off as I want. um, I haven't actually taken any time off more than the odd day or two since 2018. So I think it's time I took a little bit of time off
A
and
little
let my health
vacation.
recover a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna do that, and then I'm gonna sit down and really make sure this new series is exactly what I want it to be. And at that point is when we'll pick the dates and we'll start working about a schedule and deadlines and making sure I can hand them in without breaking myself. I would hope that the first one or two would be out this year,
Okay.
towards the end of this year.
Sweet. Have there been thoughts, since you're making a whole universe, and if this is just going to pick up massive steam and just steamroll, is there thoughts of making an RPG book series system or series for this world?
It's funny
No.
you should say that. We actually considered it with one of the other series we did. It
Okay.
didn't do as well, so we ended up having to kind of abandon it. But yes, I would be very interested if a book series takes off well enough to do some kind of TTRPG manual or something like that. Would be a lot of fun.
Because that would, we've talked a little bit on the side that like you are into role playing and like role playing. Is
Yeah,
that something you would role play
yeah,
on try and role play on stream to get an idea,
yeah,
or to like to test out
yeah,
the
possibly.
system?
Well, I'm already in the cosplay for this one, so
Right.
I
There you go.
already have the full outfit. So yeah, quite possibly that would be a lot of fun. Um, I actually have a lit RPG book, and a series. My Guild of the Eternal Flame series is kind of, I want to say Dungeons and Dragons based, but that is really not a good thing to say right now. So
No, it's
it's
tabletop
not.
RPG fantasy based.
It's it's tabletop RPG based. So I came up with some concepts for characters, and that was literally me sitting down one day and being like, I want to play a tabletop RPG by myself because there's no one to play with today. So I was like, you know what, this is just like writing a book. So I got the character sheets, and I was the DM for a while, and then I was the player for a while, and then I was the DM for a while, and then I was the player for a while. And that's how my Guild of the Eternal Flame series actually happened. That's how that started, and that's still how I write them. I've got 3 of those at the moment. There are much slower series to write, but I still write them as if they're a tabletop RPG. So that one's a nice, easy one. But then the Pyramid, which was one of the homebrew campaigns that we were playing on the Gilded Mimic network
Yep.
streams. Um,
We have the link for that in our live chat. And for
yeah,
those listening, it's twitch.tv/Gilded Mimic Network.
yeah, that's where we play. We're not playing the Pyramid at the moment. I'm going to switch it to a different TTRPG than the one it's currently based on.
Okay.
But when we do get back to playing that, I'm writing essentially the origin story of the pyramid because, as it's been revealed on the stream, it's a sentient pyramid. It's a
Okay.
sentient dungeon. So I'm writing the origin story of that as a book. So I have a lot of crossover already.
Yeah.
So yeah, it would be good at some point to get proper manuals out there and some campaigns that people can play as well, especially for the Guild of the Eternal Flame.
Right.
It should be really, really easy for me to turn those 3 books into campaigns that people can play along with as well.
Have you ever had a RPG game where you sat down and they're like, okay, people make characters, and you're like, I'm going to make this character from my book?
Not really. I try and keep them separate. I'm a little bit aware that people can accuse you of a self-insert,
Yeah.
and I'm a bit like, I try not to do that.
Yeah.
But then again, with the pyramid, I'm like, okay, this book's entirely based on the pyramid, and it's the DM's character. The DM is the pyramid, so
Right.
like it's kind of another one where you end up being a bit of a self-insert. I think I worry about it too much. I think it would be more
What
fun to
about
do
the
it
other
in
way around,
future.
where you role played for a while and you loved the character so much it became a character in a book?
Yeah, I think I would consider that. I think if I felt that the whatever I was playing as was role playing the character, if I felt that their journey wasn't finished, I might consider something like that to finish off their journey.
Have you ever thought about or been approached or anything like that for writing for a game company where, say a Shadowrun and wants to put out a book, or a Pathfinder, or, I don't want to say Star Wars because it's Star Wars, but something like that, where an RPG system or company, say Cobalt Press, is like, we're going to put out some novels. Have you ever thought about doing writing
I
for
would
companies
love
like
to do
that?
something like that. I think that would be a lot of fun to write with a company like that. That would definitely be bringing the two worlds together in a really nice way. Um, I haven't been approached. I haven't approached anyone either, so I feel a bit like there's a lot on my plate at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm very careful not to overload it until I've had a break. And then we'll see what I end up doing. I'm currently talking to someone about writing for a game, and actually writing the game dialogue and storyline and stuff like that. So I don't know if how likely that will be, but that's
Yeah.
something that I might add in a little bit of along the way as well. It would be a side job,
Yeah,
but
for
I
sure.
don't want to ever detract too much from writing my books and delivering the books that people like from me. So
Yeah,
I'm always going to prioritize writing my books, I think.
that makes sense. All right. The ultimate question, the biggest question of the night. Do you prefer to be a GM or a player?
Oh, that's a tough one. It I think it really depends. Um, there are some GMs that I love being a player for, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Being in their worlds that I love. But there's also like we could talk about it, me and Poseworth and Bear from the stream, a lot about me bringing out my inner Loki. I really, really like torturing players. There is something very satisfying about hurling something at your players and being like, let's see if you can survive this. And I've actually killed one of Poseworth's characters off in the pyramid stream. And it was very satisfying. So I love being a GM too. I don't think I could choose, to be honest. It really does depend who I'm playing with.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, there are great benefits to both. There's an element of being a player where I feel like I have a bit more free reign and I have a bit more time to think about um, what I want my character to do. So I find that on some levels easier. So especially if I'm tired,
Yeah.
I can sometimes be like, actually, I just need to play today rather than have to be in charge. Especially on the streams. I feel like when I'm GMing on the streams, you don't just have the responsibility of keeping your players on track, you have the responsibility of making sure it's good for the audience as well. Um, so I feel like that can be a lot of pressure. But equally, I'm very happy to improvise and work under pressure in those kind of environments. I kind of, to some degree, I thrive off the having to think on my feet and work out story as I go. And having written as many books as I have, I kind of feel a bit like by now I should really know story and really know characters. And if I
Yeah.
can't do it by thinking on my feet, then I've not been learning fast enough.
Yeah. Million words, right? You just million words in a 4-hour section.
Well, oh, I wish. No, I know that. I write about just over 1,000 words an hour on average.
I might get 3 or 4 words in a couple hours. I don't.
I didn't used to write that fast. I can remember, like, especially the first few years, where I'd be like, I wrote 500 words today, and I just spent like 5 hours doing it. Like now, I'm like, if I write 500 words in an hour, I'm like, I'm having a crap day, man.
Yeah.
Like this needs to be faster now. So, but it is just practice. There were days I used to despair of ever getting anywhere near 1 million words a year, and now I'm like, yeah, it's good. We can do that.
Yeah, for sure. So they can find you role playing, as I said, on twitch.tv/Gilded Mimic Network. So you role play there. You also
Hmm.
do writing on your Twitch at
Yes.
twitch.tv/Talia Beckett. Do you have any other events or things coming up that you're going to be at, maybe in the next year or so? I know you said you have some other things going on. You can't quite commit to things, but
Yeah.
tell us about.
Again, because I'm trying to take a bit of a break, I haven't committed to anything yet. We're hoping to start doing a regular sort of anniversary sort of like event on December the 4th every year.
Okay.
So there is going to be something on December the 4th this year. I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but there will be some kind of live event somewhere, some kind of, I don't want to say book signing. I'm not a fan of an event that's just I'm going to be sat behind a table signing books. I like there to be something more to it than that.
Yeah.
So there'll probably be something more like a party, or we'll go to a pub, a British pub or something.
Yeah.
So it will be something like that on December the 4th. That's the only one that I have completely set in stone. I'm also hoping to get back to Vegas in November for the big author event that I went to last year there, because that was a lot of fun and I met a lot of people. It would be really good to meet some more fans. But other than that, the middle part of the year, I'm kind of trying to work out what I've got the energy for. I want to make sure I get the books done first. So
Yeah. Take care of yourself personally and health wise and all that kind of stuff is
I need a
important.
break.
Yeah.
I need a break so I don't burn out, so the stories are still good.
People can find your Facebook group, Talia Beckett's Army of Fantastical Creatures. You can look it up there. If you're in chat, we have the link right there for you as well. You're on Instagram, Talia Beckett _author. You're also, as we said, on Twitch, twitch.tv/Talia Beckett. Are you planning on being on other, TikTok, Twitter, stuff like that?
I probably won't go on Twitter. I
Okay.
have to admit, I'm not a Twitter fan.
Okay.
TikTok we are talking about, but again, it's finding the time and making sure it fits. So if
Yeah.
I end up on TikTok, it won't be again until after I've had a break. I'm on Discord. I try and make sure I'm active on the Facebook. I have a newsletter as well. Yeah, somewhere.
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 I can't remember the link for that one.
You just have to post it on your Facebook, and then there we go.
Yes. You can get to the newsletter from the Facebook group, and you can get to the newsletter from the Discord as well. So
there we go.
I try and be active in those more and on the stream than anything else.
And those in the live stream can see the link to Discord right on the chat. Those in the podcast, you'll just have to shoot me a message or go to the Facebook page and find it through there, because it's a lot of numbers and letters and stuff like that, so it's not easy to say via podcast form. Jess/Talia, thank you so much for joining us. Stick around. We're going to be doing some live stream Q&As with the people here in the live stream. We've already got a couple questions built up ready for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me on the podcast.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends and enemies, heroes and villains, February 20th, we're going to be joined by Kobold Press's Kobold-in-Chief, Wolfgang Bauer. We will talk about the origins and evolution of Kobold Press, their Kickstarter projects, Project Black Flag, their new RPG system, and more. That's going to be, again, February 20th. The podcast will be available to listen to on the 21st. March 13th, comic book writer Erica Schultz is going to be joining us. She's written for Image Comics, Marvel Comics, DC, Dark Horse, Aftershock, Dynamite, and so much more. She's written Charmed, Xena, Daredevil, and The Deadliest Bouquet, not to mention a plethora of others. That will again be March 13th. The podcast will be available on the 14th. So please make sure to rate, review all of the things, click all of the buttons, subscribe, follow, and all of the locations you can find us. It helps our guests so much so. So thank you all so much for hanging out. Thank you, Jess / Talia, and thank you for listening to Epic Realms.